It's 5:30 and our start time. Welcome to the Open Door Cloud Zendo. Dear friends, it's with a glad heart that I welcome you this evening to our Fall Integrative Intensive, Warm Hand to Warm Hand. If we were able to offer this in person at our beautiful site, Holy Wisdom Monastery on the north side of Madison, Wisconsin, we would be calling this our fall retreat, and the weather is absolutely perfect for us to be on that beautiful prairie site. However, continuing to be in the current situation of the need for safe sheltering, we're continuing this online structure and are very glad we can be together. We learned a great deal last spring about offering an online practice opportunity. And like many practice communities, we have adapted to connecting to each other in this way in our homes. As a relational practice, this can be less than satisfying at times. And yet it also offers us connections with friends on the path who we would not be able to meet or who would not be able to attend in any other way. In the refuges we chant, we take refuge in Buddha, immersing body and mind deeply in the way. We take refuge in Dharma, entering deeply the merciful ocean of the Buddha's way. We take refuge in Sangha, bringing harmony to everyone free from hindrance. As we begin our 3 days together, the refuges are our container of practice across the time zones and across the space between us. I know that includes the Atlantic Ocean, since our friends in the UK are here with us. This brings us all together to support each other and all beings. We're faced with many challenges right now, as you all know. Coming together to practice as a community with Flint, our lead teacher, and to hear Dharma teachings which meet a deep need in our personal worlds and in the larger world. We practice from a relational perspective to wake up and to grow up. We are here for and with each other. And we hope that the structure of our time together meets these needs. We offer our hearts, warm hand to warm hand, so that no matter what happens, we remain upright and true to ourselves on this path of awakening. Practicing together, we can trust that there is always assistance. So to that end, here are the logistics for our time together so that it can go as smoothly as possible. You should all have our schedule from the details letter we sent out earlier this week. Our first meetings of the day, tomorrow and Saturday, are from 7 to 8 a.m. Sunday begins at noon to 12:45. On that day, there will be a 15-minute break for you to switch to the link for the afternoon entrustment ceremony that will close our weekend together. On Friday and Saturday, we've added an optional half an hour from 8 to 8:30 for a question and answer period after the morning Dharma talks. And if you want to participate in an in-person walking meditation here in Madison, that info and directions are in the detail letter. I've checked with Public Health Department here about meeting outdoors, and it is acceptable with care taken to wear masks and to social distance. We will be doing that at both sites, at Mickey Joe's Farm and at Holy Wisdom. The walks will begin at 10 and will go until 11 a.m. Those of you at the other locations are highly encouraged to have a period of walking meditation for yourself. If you would like to have personal contact with someone during the retreat, Kathy Rashke, our head student, and myself are available for contact. Maybe we can bring Kathy up at the end of our evening so that you can all see her. In order to have contact, just please email Open Door and we will make contact with you. If you have any technical difficulties, email Eileen at the Open Door address. So now I want to welcome Flint, and I bow to all of you, acknowledging that we stand and live on Ho-Chunk land with deep gratefulness. Welcome, Flint.
Thank you very much. And I'll remind everyone that the times that Suzanne just gave are central times in the United
Oh,
States
thank you, Flint.
because they're quite varied.
Yeah,
As the
it
morning
is.
Dharma talks are at 2 in the morning for me, so
Right. That's right. Thank you.
it's just a little past noon here today. So
Mhm.
thank you very much, Suzanne. I'm
You're
glad
welcome.
to be here once again. I miss being there and seeing the fall colors and feeling the fresh air in the Midwest at that time.
Mhm.
I don't particularly miss getting on an airplane and traveling 5 time zones um,
Mhm.
and the jet lag, but I welcome it back when it's available, believe me.
Yes, and we will welcome you, Flint, with open hearts and open arms.
Good. Well, I'll uh, I'll begin then, and we'll have some time at the end, possibly for some questions and answers. And um, um, I forgot to ask if that might be a possibility. Um, Certain people might be able to come forward and ask questions at the end, sort of like we do an inquiry. If that's possible, we can think about that. But we um, we have until
Flint, to that end, yes, let's please do that. We had some requests after the spring retreat that there wasn't enough time for that. So let's please do that.
yeah, and we've used a little time today, so it may be a little busy, but we'll see. Because tonight's have a, you know me, it's a full talk.
And you know me.
Yes,
So,
yes.
okay,
It's
thank you,
beautiful.
Flint.
It's totally beautiful. And I welcome everyone, even though I can't see your faces. I did click on the participant list so I could see it and was thrilled to read the list and see people coming online. And so many of the faces that I can't see, I'm imagining because I remember you and you're in my heart. Tonight or today, wherever you might be, is uh, an overview and an orientation, hopefully a gentle and a very general orientation to the kind of teachings which we're going to engage to support and encourage our shared practice, which is the function of the teachings, really. And these teachings invite us to turn in a certain direction as we orient our hearts and our minds and our bodies toward a celebratory moment at the end of the retreat. The entrustment of two lay teachers in the Appamada lineage. And this entrustment is an acknowledgement of something already accomplished. But ceremony is vitally important, especially in the life of community of our sanghas. You will have received, I believe, an email with some digital handouts, which includes two translations of a poem, which we'll talk about just a bit tonight. I'm going to talk about more tomorrow. I keep saying tonight as if it's the first evening. Um, so you'll receive those two translations. You'll also receive a little chart of Tozan's five or Dongshan's five ranks and some uh, small verses. Please don't be dismayed by what you see. I'm offering these to you so that you'll have background for some of the things I'll be mentioning, but this will not be a full academic or even dharmic um, discourse on all of these um, particular classical teachings. When we did a similar retreat for the entrustment ceremonies, the first lay entrustment ceremonies at Appamada in Austin, back in January before the pandemic hit, Peg and I both took an entire week, and we're only going to take a couple of days. But we have a slightly different um, arrangement here where each day I'm going to speak to an essential piece of this warm hand to warm hand transmission. In the next 2 mornings, you'll hear the two wonderful entrusted teachers speak about this from their hearts. And I think we'll be able to weave lovely teachings together to provide the container for the ceremony, which will arrive on Sunday. You'll see this calligraphy that's behind me by Kaz Tanahashi, which many of you recognize this kind of calligraphy that he does and know his name and may have spent some time with him. He's a master calligrapher, a translator, a peace activist, an artist, and a deeply practiced Zen student. He was here at Huiholana, just down the road from where I am on Molokai last year, the year before, and he taught and led a course on calligraphy here. And he spoke about the first tasks that his teacher gave him in studying calligraphy. And he said, so many of the old masters would give you the task to make a line, one line. He said, you learn to put your brush onto the paper with conviction, to stay with it fully, and end with some vitality. And this is a practice for 10 years, a single line. But this is our practice, isn't it? To start with conviction. And most of us, when we began practice, didn't know what for. We felt a conviction, we felt a dedication, a call, a pull, some sort of energy, but in some ways we probably couldn't tell you exactly what it was, although we could speak about something that motivated us. But we start with some conviction, stay with it for years, hopefully, as best we can. And in some point, it will end. And when it does, what will have been the mark? What will people see? What will they feel? What will be the residue of that action called a life? And these teachings around the transmission from warm hand to warm hand is about how that kind of simple, ongoing, living practice is transmitted. The piece that you have, which you needn't refer to really right now, the Song of the Jewel Mirror Samadhi, begins with a line in one of the translations, the one that we most commonly chant anyway. The teachings of thusness have been intimately communicated. Now you have it. So keep it well. And that word thusness or suchness, the nameless and characterless reality in its ultimate nature. There is a calligraphy of this character that I first encountered at San Francisco Zen Center, at City Center in San Francisco, in a hallway, and I was very struck by it, so I asked Blanche about it. And she said, oh, that's the calligraphy for the character that we translate as thusness or suchness, like we find in the Jewel Mirror Samadhi. And the way that it is done is a visual and graphic and embodied, to me, expression of its meaning. The piece of paper on which it's made is about 3 feet wide and only about 8 or 9 inches tall. So rather than a long column that you might see in a scroll that hangs, it's a long piece this way, framed. And on the left-hand side, toward the left-hand edge, there is the character, which ends, remember you put down your brush with conviction, carry through the entire thing, and end, and then for the remainder, there's a line. It's this, there's this energy that goes forward into everything, as everything, from everything, thusness. And just the energy of it was so beautiful. The imagery was so powerful. The meaning sunk in. And as you know, Blanche, there's a picture of her at Tassajara here behind the Buddha, which may be a little small for you to see, but she was my ordination teacher, my heart teacher. She was technically, among many, but she was technically my primary Dharma ancestor. And as so, she offered me entrustment, just as we will be passing on, Peg and I will be passing on this week to 2 new teachers. The teaching of thusness has been intimately communicated, intimately, hand to hand, person to person, warm hand to warm hand. Now you have it, so keep it well. This was her invitation to me. This was her wish. And her line, her life, is finished. Begun with conviction, carried through with real, human, embodied life, right to the end with vitality. But her lineage, her heart, her mind, her teachings exist and continue through her Dharma heirs and here, now, among us. We live on in this practice, and her teachings live on through us, and then will be carried forward more formally by our 2 entrustees, intimately, most intimately. The teachings of thus have been intimately communicated. Now you have it, so keep it well. If we look at some of the essential stories, one of the primary stories about this warm hand to warm hand, we return to Dongshan from the 9th century. Between the 6th and the 9th century in China was what's often called the Golden Age of Zen. It's where a lot of the stories that we read about the cultivation of Chan, with its strong marriage and union of North Indian and Tibetan Buddhism that moved into China, and the Taoism and Confucianism that had been in the mountains and the hearts of the Chinese people. And this revolution produced Chan, and later we called it Zen in Japan. The Dongshan, as he had spent some time in his line with his teacher, Yunyan, As he was ready to leave, because this was often the way, someone would study with a teacher for a good while at a temple and then maybe go to another place to either lead and teach and help a community or deepen their study and practice with another teacher. And when he was ready to leave, Dongshan asked Yunyan later on, if someone asks me if I can depict your reality, if someone asks me what your teaching was, how shall I reply? What am I to say? I would imagine in the 9th century, one sets out on foot to another mountain because the temples were typically on mountains named after them. There was a good sense that you probably would not see each other again. Curiously, it's that same poignancy I feel right now. Are we going to see each other again? We get to do this, but we'll be able to walk hand in hand, see each other face to face, sit next to each other. So Dongshan is asking later on, if someone asks me what your teachings were, how should I reply? And Yunyan paused, and then he said, just this is it. Just this is it. When he heard that, Dongshan took it in, sank into kind of a reverie, a deep state of, and took it with him. And seeing this, Yunyan said to Dongshan, because now he sees his disciple departing, he says, you are now in charge of the great matter. You must be most thorough going. You're now in charge. I'm handing it to you. Take it forward. So Dongshan left, it said, and remained perplexed even as he continued his practice and his own teachings for the next 20 years. And one day, it said while wading across a stream, he sees his reflection in the water. This seems to be an interesting echo in stories, something about suddenly yourself is revealed. He finally realized what his teacher was trying to tell him. And he wrote a poem, variously translated. This is the one that I have. He wrote, just don't seek from others, or you'll be far estranged from yourself. Now I go alone, but everywhere I meet it, it now is me. I am not it. One must understand in this way to merge with thusness. Just don't seek it from others, or you'll be estranged from yourself. Now I go alone, but everywhere I meet it, it now is me. I am not it. One must understand in this way to merge with thusness. Later on, Dongshan wrote the Song of the Jewel Mirror Samadhi. And you will probably notice on the copy that I have given you, this is a hard copy, it says, written by Tozan Ryokai. Tozan is Dongshan's Japanese name. Same person. So we might switch back and forth now and then. The song, it's a poem about samadhi, which is like a jewel mirror. When Suzuki Roshi would say, things as it is, that's the short version of what Dongshan is writing about. The relative and absolute. Think of it an image of a jewel or a precious mirror, which as you sit reveals something precious about ourselves, each other, everything else. This is not something to be acquired through effort and meditation. It's already present, but does require conviction to be personally realized, discerned, and carefully sustained. Begun with conviction, carried fully through the end with vitality. This longer poem, the Song of the Jewel Mirror Samadhi, began being chanted by Minzan Juiho in the 17th century, late 17th, early 18th century, in the Soto Zen liturgy. This is 800 years later. And Minzan's work and some of his teachings were some of the favorites of Joko Beck, another one of our Dharma ancestors that brings us this Appamada way. I want to mention another old story, and I'm calling on some of these older stories today, not to give you esoteric Zen lore so much as to help you realize that what's happening right now with these teachings, with this community, on these few days, capped by this ceremony, is precisely what's happened for over 1,000 years. Hui Ning, who was one of the great ancestors of our tradition, and he had an encounter with Huairong, who was one of his teachers, and they lived in the late 7th, early 8th century, 170 years before Dongshan. And they were discussing practice and attainment and having a bit of a debate. Strange word to be thinking of these days. And Hui Ning, at some point in the debate, in the discussion, says to Huairong, "Are you telling me that there's no such thing as practice and realization?" They'd gotten to this point. And Huairong says, "I didn't say that there's no practice and no realization. Just don't defile it. Just don't defile it." And Hui Ning responds by saying, all Buddhas practice this non-defiling way. You are thus, and I am thus too. The teachings of thusness have been intimately communicated. You are thus, and I am thus too. All Buddhas practice this non-defiling way. Just not getting in the way of the Dharma. You can't create it. You can't create ultimate reality. There's no creation of the uncreated. But you can defile or obstruct it through our favorite method, which is self-centered practice for personal gain. But if we continue with the echoes through our lineage, recalling Joshu, one of the great, great masters of this time, who lived in the 8th century, into the 9th, you see that these practitioners had the same questions we all have. What are we doing? Do you get anything out of this? What exactly are we to realize? And why do we do this? I know that most of you ask those kinds of questions. If you don't, you're not paying attention. And in one of the great exchanges between Joshu and his teacher Nansen, which is case 19 of the Mumonkan, or the Gateless Gate, it's one of the seminal stories in our lineage, where Joshu comes to his teacher Nansen and says the small version of all of these questions, which is, to his teacher, what is the way? What is the way? And Nansen says, the ordinary mind is the way. Joshu says, well, then should I direct myself toward it or not? And Nansen said in that what seems like a classic Zen way. He said, if you turn toward it, if you try to turn toward it, you go against it. There's a Taoist flavor in that. And Joshu asked, he keeps with it. He said, if I stay with it, if I do not turn toward it, then how can I know it's the way? And Nansen then begins to offer some clarification. He says, the way does not belong to knowing and not knowing. As long as these are your two choices, you're lost. The way does not belong to knowing or not knowing. Knowing is actually delusion. You think you've made and gotten something. But not knowing is a blank consciousness. You can't just skip out on this thing. And he says, when you have really reached the true way beyond all doubt, you'll find it as vast and boundless as the great empty firmament, as vast and boundless as great empty space. How could it be talked about on a level of right or wrong? And it's said at these words, then Joshu had an awakening, or was opened. He began to step beyond the dualistic questions that he was trying to contain practice inside of. Step beyond, not defiling, not knowing or not knowing. And everyone is asking these questions. The two trustees and trustees will be asked questions at the end of their ceremony, and you'll hear these questions. Is there some way to approach all of this which is transformative? Yes, that is our practice. That's what we're transmitting. But we have to engage. Without seeing knowing and not knowing as your only two options. And this thing about doubt, Nansen didn't say you reach a place without doubt. He said beyond all doubt. Beyond the doubt you will inevitably have. You step into a place that's vast and boundless. Suchness. Thusness. And returning to Dongshan, who had asked, oh, what do I tell people? His teacher said, just this is it. And so he said, just don't seek from others or you'll be far estranged from yourself. You have to do this, he's saying. This is your practice. Yes, we can come together, and it's inevitable and necessary that we do. There's no way to practice without that. We will offer the teachings. The teachings take you back to realizing that it's always and already true in you now. Just this is it. You are not it. It actually is you. We'll see later. You have to do this. Just don't seek from others. Doesn't mean don't get teachings. Don't practice together. And then later, now I go alone, but everywhere I meet it. But you don't meet it by yourself. And it's expressing itself all around you all the time, closer than you can imagine. Imagine a jewel mirror. We have what's called, translated as the song of the jewel mirror samadhi. The song means it's something that sings out or proclaims or offers something beautiful. And it's a song about samadhi, about this mind that is vast, empty, awake, vital, unbound, beyond all doubt, as vast as empty. That's samadhi. It's a song about samadhi in the images of a jewel mirror. That mind reflects everything exactly as it is in intimacy. It's like if you look here, it reflects that. If you look there, it reflects that. If you look here, it reflects this. No matter where you look, there's only a reflection of everything, and it's one thing, expressing itself in this myriad profusion of ways. Everywhere you look. Everything is manifesting is only this, it, one thing with its myriad expressions. Confucianism was part of this culture in which Chan evolved. Confucius said, the way is at hand, but people are looking for it afar. Farmers are using it every day without being aware of it. We cannot be separated from the way, even for an instant. What you can be separated from is not the way. I love that. It's here, yet you look somewhere else. They say farmers are using it because in that context, farmer means the most kind of basic folks around. And by the way, all of us are part of Soto Zen right now, our lineage. And Soto Zen was talked about as farmer Zen. It was a derogatory comment. Rinzai was the real, tough, shattering, masculine. That was the real thing. Soto Zen, yeah, you sit around, sit zazen. I'm being a little silly, but in some ways it was not looked at and esteemed from that kind of competitive direction. And yet here Confucius says, farmers are using it every day without being aware of it. That is our practice. And we cannot be separated from the way even for an instant. So when we sit in zazen, we're expressing and celebrating that realization that we're not separate and that we're expressing that wholeness through our body. What we can be separated from is not the way. But it's such a struggle. Here's a more contemporary expression, and I apologize because I haven't practiced in the lineage of Star Wars as much as I have Zen. And I heard a talk which I really appreciated from one of my Dharma brothers at San Francisco Zen Center when he was talking about the original Star Wars movie, in 1976. I can't believe it was that long ago. Revolutionized movie making and how people view movies. And it took them like 10 years, for them to make the next one, even though it seems like an endless series at this point. And in that, they tried something very interesting. They decided to tell the truth. Now, by that time, The Matrix and some of these other movies who were delving into really some popular culture, science fiction ways of expressing Dharma, really, there were deep aspects of that there, had already happened. And so the next movie was going to tell the truth. And here's what was communicated in that movie. Elevated masters are not real. Superheroes do not exist. All we have are the relationships around us that tie us together and our ability to take care of each other. This is all we can rely on. Alone, you're no one. Your parents will not save you. And to think that a certain elevated class of people have some special relationship to reality is vanity and hubris. Hubris. It sounds like the Dharma, doesn't it? So these are some of the themes in the next movie. People lost their minds. They hated it. In fact, some of the newer movies, the newest one, just out a year or so ago, in this seemingly endless series, apparently denies all of this. It's like, oh, never mind. And think about what's going on in this country right now. In this case, with this movie, people were presented with the truth and they ragefully demanded a fantasy. And that is breathtakingly human. And being painfully expressed right now all around us. Our assumptions about the world are deeply disturbed by reality. And it's deeply human not to want to face it. And that is the genius and power and challenge of our practice. Just this. Our school, Soto Zen, is about just sitting, Shikan Taza, just sitting, just this. No fancy meditative techniques or esoteric practices to develop some special mind states or powers or qualities. So I think it's altogether a very impressive practice, what I've come to understand after all these years. And it's impressive because it allows us to fail faster, to fail at the inevitable human attempt to construct our fantasies that we seem to cling to and demand, to fail in our human attempt to construct our fantasies about our spiritual practice. So you can become one of those mysterious masters or superheroes of Zen, so you can attain to that special class of people who have a corner on some special wisdom, like those in trustees. Or so you can simply get out of this life you have been given, which is a great and perfect gift. It's the very thing that you seek, and yet we attempt to leave it. We squirm and fidget. We feel it in retreat, especially when we're sitting together in long retreats, in the same room, in small spaces that we're sharing. We do squirm and fidget, and we get mad, we get fearful, we get super irritated by the people around us, and the teachings, and the teacher. Because what we're really squirming in response to is reality. Just this. We make things simple. Just sit, just walk, just eat. Some of you have heard me quote W.S. Merwin, the great poet we lost last year, who said, we're asleep with a compass in our lap. In other words, we have everything we need to direct ourselves, and it's right here. And all we have to do is wake up. It's right there. We have to construct it. The instructions will be readily available. We have to open our eyes, wake up. But there's nothing special about it. There's no great content. Later on in his life, he said, as an old man, he said, now all my teachers are dead, except silence. Just sitting. Just this is it. Ordinary mind is the way. Things as it is. All these are just synonyms for Zazen. And just this is it, as Suzanne mentioned in her introduction, are the refuges. I take refuge, I return to the Dharma, I return to the Buddha, I return to the Sangha. Just this is it. You needn't look, but if you happen to have your copy of the Song of the Jewel Mirror Samadhi, the first line in the translation that I've been referring to mostly says the teaching of thusness has been intimately communicated by Buddhas and ancestors. Now you have it, so keep it well. The other translation that we're using also says, it is this very Dharma the Buddha and patriarchs secretly transmitted. Now that you have it, practice it well. Protect it well. Protect it well. Those first two sentences of either translation encompass the entire retreat. The Dharma, of course, are the teachings, but the Dharma in its deeper meaning is ultimate reality, things as they are, the way things are. And it's said in that second translation, the Dharma is secretly transmitted. Now, this secret transmission isn't something that we do in the dead of night and don't tell anybody. We haven't done that with Suzanne, not with Josh. Not because it's some strange thing that's held back, this secret. It is a secret because no one ever directly tells you. Yet it's waiting and manifesting right in front of you. No one can describe it and make it into a thing they can give you, because thusness or suchness is not that. So we wonder, are we teaching thusness, or is thusness teaching all the time? Am I offering you the teachings of thusness, or is thusness this teaching? What they were transmitting, what these teachers were transmitting, is reality, and you have it. Just don't mess it up. Don't defile it, remember? If you happen to have your copy, if you go about 6 lines down, there's a place where it says, the meaning is not in the words, yet it responds to the inquiring impulse. That line, in some ways, turned the way I've taught. I give you lots of words. Certainly, if you look on the Appamada website, if you look at the content that's there, the unbelievable number of beautiful Dharma talks that Peg has given, the things that we've written, things that are there, we use a lot of words. The meaning isn't captured, it's not in those words. Dongshan said, yet it responds to the inquiring impulse. The meaning responds to the inquiring impulse. So we engage inquiry. That's happening all the time, really. Is that, what are we doing? What is the way? How do we carry forward? The meaning comes in the questioning. You show up as the inquiring impulse. And the meaning isn't what I'm saying. The meaning is in your arrival and participation. When you arrive and show up so that we can meet, the response is already there. You have to show up. I have to show up for the response to arrive. And in the middle of this piece, which I'll speak about more tomorrow, it says, it's like facing a jewel mirror. Form and image behold each other. You are not it. It actually is you. You remember Dongshan's poem? It's like facing a jewel mirror. Form and image behold each other. You are not it. It actually is you. You are not some object. It's all subject. And yet we experience this between each other. You've heard me say this story that Blanche told me about the first time she met Suzuki Roshi and Dokusan. And as they sat there, and she was, of course, nervous, she said, as I looked in his face, I could see that what he saw was Buddha, and that made no sense to me. What was she seeing? A Buddha. What did he see? The reflection. Inquiry and response come up together. Should be a little sign on the back of the chair at inquiry. It's like facing a jewel mirror. Form and image behold each other. You are not it. It actually is you. I'll also tell you that in this longer poem, there's some teachings woven in called Dongshan's or Tozan's 5 ranks, or I don't like the word rank, 5 perspectives. 5 perspectives on awakening, 5 perspectives on the middle way, 5 perspectives on how to understand the 2 truths, relative and absolute. And we'll say a little bit about those perspectives. So we sit to experience the failure of our curative fantasies and our grasping. All of our human, just everyday human attempts to get something or get somewhere And this prepares you for a profound and deeper appreciation and gratitude for just this, the very thing that all Buddhas and ancestors have transmitted, warm hand to warm hand. Nothing special. They continue to remind us. And that ongoing, unbroken expression, that everyday transmission through our human lives, that's truly breathtaking. And that penetrating and profound simplicity, which includes everything as has been practiced, embodied, and cherished by people for several thousand years, has been so important that they've made sure that there's someone who can and is willing to follow them and carry this forward so the light won't go out. And that's beautifully breathtaking to me. At the end of Dharma talks at San Francisco Zen Center and many temples, there is a chant that's often done, you've heard me repeat it, an unsurpassed and penetrating Dharma is rarely met with, even 100,000 million kalpas. Having it to see and listen to remember and accept, I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's words. An unsurpassed and penetrating, perfect Dharma. That's all there is. There's nothing but that. Everything's already perfected. Not made like you want it. Not perfected meaning according to your specifications. But this Dharma is rarely met with. It doesn't mean very few people have taught it. It means it's not met. Even in 100,000 million kalpas in a long, long time. But we do have it. So having it to see and listen to remember and accept, just this is it. Having it to see and listen to and remember and accept, I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's words. The most primitive and non-conceptual of our senses, taste. Not understand, not think about, memorize, write down, keep in our notes. I vow to taste an embodied response to the words. The meaning is not in the words, yet it responds to the inquiring impulse. Buddhas only sit and practice for everything and everyone. If it's not for everything and everyone, it's not Buddha's practice. You are not just sitting for yourself, as you know, and also not just for the entrustees. You are sitting as just this. Your sitting is carrying on the light. Buddha said, make of yourself a light. He didn't say, now someone will get it and they'll have the light, and they'll be acknowledged as teachers, and they will carry forward the light. No. He said we're all reflectors, not the light. And yet we are the source. This is a jewel mirror in which everything is reflecting truth. Just look around. Here's one final story. Our ancestor stories, which help us feel the way this is carried through conviction, continuation. Liangshan, who was the student, studying with Tung An in China, and served as his attendant for many, many years. This is, I think, the first story that Blanche ever taught to me, because Blanche held the sewing lineage. She held the lineage of how the Rakusus and the Okesas and these were thought of as the body of the Buddha were sewn. And she loved this story because of it. So the student Liangshan, studying with Tung An, and one day the old guy The senior entered the hall, but he didn't have his, Okesa didn't have his robe. So the student, Yongshan, realized this, and so he scurried out, got the robe, and brought it to his teacher. These are things that those of us who've been an attendant have done. And as the older teacher put on his robe, he said to the student standing behind him, "What is it? What is it beneath the patched robe?" You know, these are sewn with, you can't see it, patches of fabric. What is it beneath the patched robe? And the student didn't respond. He kind of stood there, as many of us might have, having heard the question. And continuing to adjust his okesa and get everything settled, it takes a bit. The older man said, "It is most painful when one who studies Buddhism and has not reached that stage." So you ask me, and I'll tell you. It's an interesting sleight of hand the teachers do. Let's change roles. So Yangshan, the younger teacher said, student said, "What is it that's beneath the patched robe?" And the old man said, "Intimacy." I can remember Blanche saying that to me and telling the story. This is the end of the way this koan is presented. But there is a dialogue that followed that someone recorded. So Liangshan, on having a bit of realization with this, made his bows with his tears of gratitude, like I can feel. It said they wet his robe. His tears of gratitude to his teacher. And so his teacher said, very kindly, "Now that you have had a taste of realization, can you express it? Show me. I can see it, but can you express it?" And Liangshan, the younger student, said that he could. So the old man started back at the beginning and said, "What is this? What is that beneath the patched robe?" And Liangshan said, "Intimacy." And the old man echoed, "Intimacy. Intimacy. Only intimacy." And this is our way. So I see that we have probably about half an hour. Having oriented you to these kinds of teachings, to this lineage, to this way of understanding, transmission, entrustment. Just a beginning, of course. But maybe it's brought something forward. And please come forward with these essential expressions, whatever is most intimate in you right now. I think you can raise your hand like we do for inquiry, if I'm not mistaken. Remember, in each of these stories, when a particular place has been reached, it's said that the student or the questioner paused for a while, maybe thought about it for a long time, like Dongshan did for 20 years. So pausing is useful. But the meaning is not in the words. It responds to the inquiring impulse. Even if there's just something you'd like to say about what's moved in you, touched you, called you forward in a new way. Responds to the inquiring impulse, so your arrival is what's required.
Flint, it's Suzanne.
Yes, I see you.
Oh, that's right.
You're right in front of me now.
Um, I wrote down two two pieces, and I think they're connected.
Mm-hmm.
What I can be separated from is not the way,
Mm-hmm.
and we celebrate what we can't be connected from.
We can't be connected from.
We celebrate what we can't be connected from. We can't be separated from. I'm sorry,
Separated from. There you go. All right.
separated from. There seems to be a space between the two.
Mm-hmm.
And that space, I can fill that space up with my physical life. But if I do, that's not the way.
It's part of the way, but it's not the way with a capital W.
Yes. And it's, well, if it's part of the way, it's my vehicle for
Wayness.
wayness,
Yeah.
hutchness, thusness.
Because nothing is outside of it,
That's right. Okay.
but
I,
it's not contained only in it.
hmm. Hmm.
Anything you can name and describe
Hmm.
is bounded, and thusness or suchness is without bounds. It's contained within, but it doesn't contain the whole. You are not it, it actually is you.
Hmm. This goes beyond words, and yet we have to use words.
Yes.
Hmm.
The meaning is not in the words, yet it responds to the inquiring impulse.
Hmm.
The space that opens between you and me now
Hmm.
is what you're pointing to, but it's not contained in just the words.
Okay. Hmm.
And there are times as you approach and live with the intimacy of your current situation, words fail, and yet we have to use them.
Hmm.
It's opening to as vast as the great firmament, empty firmament, it says that in the koan of ordinary mind.
Hmm.
You'll discover that it's vast,
Hmm.
and you are discovering that.
Hmm. I stood on a bluff yesterday, overlooking the driftless valley here outside of Madison, and you just described it,
Mhm.
the vastness.
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah, looking to the horizon, that illusory boundary,
Hmm.
knowing that there are no boundaries, but we see it because that's who we are, and we're limited. But our minds and our hearts, our realization takes us beyond the limitations that even what our heart and mind perceive.
Hmm. Hmm. Thank you. Thank you, dear teacher.
Thank you, dear teacher.
Start my video. I think I did it.
You did, Kathy. There you are.
I'm awfully bright. I'm sorry.
You
That's
are really bright.
what I really want to do is tell a story. Um, because Flint knows and Suzanne and Efrat know that the three of us spent part of the afternoon at Threshold setting up for the entrustment. And, it wasn't easy. The internet failed, and then Suzanne's volume on her computer failed, and then there's all the remembering of when you bow and et cetera, et cetera. It was kind of, my experience was, boy, this is hard. This is kind of tense, right?
Very challenging.
Yeah, it was very challenging. And then I came home and I'm having dinner, and what arose from me was, before your talk tonight, that's what's important. What arose from me was the thought, I need to tell Efrat and Suzanne my appreciation for the intimacy that we shared today. So in the midst of all that ordinary stuff, that, so I, let Suzanne use my computer, and we worked on together on how things looked and all that just relating,
It's just everyday life.
just everyday life. And
Like that in the jewel mirror at that moment.
right. And so what a joy for me to have that experience, and to say, I have to, send Suzanne and Efrat a text saying thank you for the intimacy that we shared. And now I can do it in front of them. And I can say that, yeah, that's it. And I couldn't have created it, right? I couldn't have created that intimacy. It had to bloom on its
You,
own.
you might have done something that invited it, but the intimacy is not created. The intimacy, like you said, blooms on its own.
Right. So I just wanted to share that story because I thought it was really apt for what you talked about.
Absolutely. There's a new ancestor story now. It's just really young. It's not several centuries old like the ones I've been sharing with you.
Right.
And I also think it's important that you could feel, I'll use a different word, the weight of the ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
Not it's difficult not just because it's kind of a pain and
Mm-hmm.
complicated to remember the things.
Mm-hmm.
And it isn't even important that it's done perfectly. It is important that you do it wholeheartedly
Mm-hmm.
and that you give it your best, knowing that it's not perfectible, believe me.
Mm-hmm.
When I was at San Francisco Zen Center, we do very, very complex things with a whole retinue of people. And when we go back to the place where we'd be getting out of our robes and changing back in, we would laugh and talk about all the mistakes,
Mm-hmm.
which hopefully no one saw because we carried on with some dignity.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the model for our life.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to make, as Dogen said, one continuous mistake. So how do we do that with great dignity, with conviction, seeing it all the way through to the end with vitality?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Intimacy, only intimacy.
Right. Right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And thanks for your help with the ceremony. Catherine,
Hello, I can't see you.
there you go. Can you see
Okay.
now?
Well, I can't. No, I can't see. Oh, now I can. Yes. Hi, teacher.
Yes. Hi there, sweetie. Good to
So,
see you.
yeah. Well, greetings from New Mexico.
Oh, I wondered
So,
if you were in your new place or where you were, but I see the adobe.
yeah, yeah. So, what I heard you say to us in some ways, maybe not exactly, is that we're all perfect, you know, humans and stuff,
Yeah.
beings, and also, and that we have a light, right? And that we still, for some reason, need to sit zazen, right? That this is like part of our task in a way.
Yes.
And so I know for myself, sometimes I know that we're on the theme of warm hand to warm hand and intimacy. But sometimes I can sit on the cushion to avoid intimacy.
Yep.
And I know that about myself. And then other times I feel my zazen is actually helpful.
Hmm.
Intimacy with myself, with the environment, with nature, with other humans. So could you speak to that a little bit?
How do you know that you sit to avoid intimacy?
Well, I think that when I notice myself doing that, I feel more contracted on the
Uh-huh.
cushion, right? Like more not as relaxed or open. And it's almost like doing it to create distance or something, or to create more like a cocoon or something like that, right?
And so that you know all of that is intimacy.
Oh, okay.
And it's true that we may be doing it, you have an intention to hide or hang out or, be quiet or whatever, which
Right.
may not seem like the turning toward, but actually what you're turning toward is, if you notice it at all, that's the intimacy. And right now, the intimacy that you're practicing is the one of confession. And all the
Yeah.
other, and there are about 50 other people going, oh, yeah, I do that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
See, the intimacy awareness is always with you. Even if your reflection on it is like, oh, I'm less aware, I'm more aware. How do you know? Because awareness is always with you.
Right. Okay.
Intimacy is always
Yeah.
there. Just don't defile it.
Okay. So what does that mean exactly? Like, how would you defile that experience of sitting in zazen? How would that look?
Judging yourself,
Oh, I see. Okay.
thinking it's something other than it is. Just
Hmm.
keep turning it back around towards the intimacy. Keep finding that compass that's in your lap that you've been asleep and not noticing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we sit to realize what's always and already true, to notice the light, whatever all those images you're referring to. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Thank
It-
you.
it's more simple but more radical. And it isn't
Yeah.
about letting go and just saying, oh well, it's all perfect. It's a radical step beyond.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's what it feels like. It doesn't feel like so many ways, it doesn't feel true that it's all perfect, you know? And
It isn't
so it's a
our
radical step.
mind. To our discursive
Yeah.
mind, it's anything but perfect. You look around and see all that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything
Yeah.
is a
Uh,
perfect
eh,
expression of everything else.
yeah. And so when you go beyond like judging everything, you realize, well, for me, I realize things are so deeply connected that what I do affects everything out there.
That's right.
And right. And
That's the Dharma talk
but
I gave
yet
in the
sitting
inquiry.
zazen is what,
Yep.
yeah. So, but to sit zazen is intentional, right? And so the intention is, in a funny way, it's an odd contradiction. It's like sitting zazen is an intention to do something,
Yes.
right? And what is it that you're doing, right? And so for me, sometimes I notice I'm like escaping something or being contracted. And sometimes I notice that I'm opening up. And
Okay.
I do judge that. I got to say, I do judge
Sure.
that. So, yeah,
So if Buddha's Zazen is sitting with no preference for enlightenment and no aversion to delusion, there's just the sitting, which is the celebration of your nature as a Buddha, then whatever arises is included. So you're a lazy Buddha. So you're a angry Buddha. So you're a hiding Buddha.
thank you, Flint.
Thank you. It's amazingly delightful to see you.
It's so great to see you.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
I can. I can see you also.
Okay. I thought so. I was like, well, this is an interesting turn of events.
It is.
So, yeah,
We thought we'd meet like this.
right. I know. I wanted to just first thank the Wisconsin Sangha for the opportunity. It means a lot to all of us that are elsewhere. So, I'm in the Austin community, so I'm really grateful for this. Just wanted to say that. And also, of course, to see your beautiful face. So this morning,
Talking to me?
huh?
You're talking to me?
Yes, you hot stuff. So, this morning, that was a very powerful opening talk, and I'm grateful for that as well. This morning, I think I'm right now angry Buddha. I think I'm an angry Buddha, and I wrote an essay this morning, and it wasn't very well done, but something you said in the Star Wars piece of the talk, I wrote it down because it was part of it. And you said, when presented with the truth, they ragefully demanded a fantasy.
Yep.
And so that's why I'm angry Buddha.
Yep.
You know, and
That
so
one, that one seems to be going around these days, doesn't it?
the part about angry people,
Demanding a fantasy.
yeah. And it's these days, and it's every day, and it's forever in the past and forever in the future. And um I've been practicing for so long, and it just gets harder and harder, and I don't know why. But I'm also just sad. I mean, you always tell me underneath angry is sad. So I know I'm just broken. My heart is broken just regularly, and I don't know. I just don't know how to keep trying.
With us, with that gratitude that you felt in the beginning.
Totally.
And there's no way you can do it. I mean, I know enough about your background to know that it's easy for you to think that you're going to have to be alone with it all, because that's, how things started out. But that's
Yeah.
sort of psychological conditioning piece. I got to do it on my own, but you don't. And it's that kind of surrender, which is a real practice edge for you to really surrender to care and to others. And I've seen you do it. I see how it works and how well you take it in. You're able to take in that nourishment in ways you haven't been in the past.
Yeah.
But ongoing. The hard thing, like when you said practice gets harder, that's just showing you where there's resistance. And you know
Yeah,
that.
that's right. Like I resent the way our mind works, you know? I
That's right.
resent it.
Until you're willing to accept and choose that you're a human and other humans, that's the way we are.
I know it's
And go
crazy
about the
because
business of doing good work, which you do amazingly, Sunny,
thank you.
in response to this thing that you don't like. As long as you fight it and you're working uphill, someday people will have different kinds of minds. Oh, girl.
You know, it's like when you talk about intimacy, and clearly that relational intimacy is part of our work. But the thing is, the closer in you get, the muddier it is. And that's why it
Some
keeps getting
days,
harder.
on some days.
Well, with most people, like normal people.
And he tell me that there are moments with me or the dogs, or with Chet, or with Fran, or with Margaret, or on and on. There are moments where all of the things you're saying right now fall away, and
Yeah.
you just feel some easy, simple love.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
That's good. I'm glad you're acknowledging it instead of just the other. The other does happen, but that happens too, and you're capable of it.
Yeah.
Practice is making more space for that.
Yeah, that's important. Um,
Essen-
and that's, I'm taking that in. Go ahead. Say
I just said essential. You said important. It's like, underline it.
that. Uh-huh. So can I just see if I'm getting it? Like, do you think my conditioning inclines me to focus more on the places that are broken instead of noticing the places that are healthy? Because
That's the way the human brain is.
that's what I'm saying. That's why I'm mad at it. Just the whole
And
design.
and there are ways in which your conditioning goes right along that because the human brain evolution has set us up to be concerned about threat
Hmm.
and to let and hold on to some experiences that are not so great and let the good ones slide off.
Hmm.
Um, so that's kind of how the hardware is set or whatever. But
Yeah.
then when you have experiences that are consistently and long-term traumatic, well, that really steers you even further. So, you're just coming back out of that.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty fresh, and I'm
And
in recovery.
you
Yeah.
can do it, and you are doing it. I'm on the side of that possibility.
Yeah, that's why I really needed to hear your message just now about committing and staying the course with vitality, because it's not easy. Uh, and
And it's what's easy is for you to tell that story. I realize it's hard. I'm not denying that, but that's what's easy. What's harder is to say, "Oh yeah," and not instead of and at the same time. Just put the love and the clarity and the joy and the excitement and the create all right just next to that other stuff.
yeah,
Doesn't have to say that'll go away and this'll. That's the dualistic. It's not going to happen.
right. Okay, so I
Right. The most important part is because of your teaching and your writing, when you see someone else wake up a little bit, that's your intimacy.
yeah, but it's so tiny. Like I was thinking about when the Buddha decided to teach. I mean, I think about that a lot, and also when you and teach and Peg teach, I think about how much it takes to do that, because you guys are not deluded about what you're stepping into, and it just takes so much. I mean, maybe little, but not as much as me, and so I just admire it.
And you are disciplining yourself to something like that in the work you do because you keep putting yourself in it.
I know, but I don't have what it takes. That's what I'm experiencing.
You wouldn't be asked if you didn't have what it takes. It may not look like Peg, may not look like me, may not look like it's going to look like you. Why did you get asked by all these people to teach at the United Nations? Come on.
Because I've tricked them all.
That's what you think. It keeps happening, Sonny, so come on.
Well, I guess it's encouraging. I appreciate the encouragement.
And all I'm saying is look closer at the impact you have rather than your own feelings because they're going to come and go. It doesn't mean don't take care of yourself, of course. Use us, use those who care about you for support. But look at the impact you have and see the good. That's the result of your awakening, not your feelings.
Yeah, focusing differently. That's really helpful, of course, always.
It's
Yeah.
because you're so trained in IFS. If you see more self energy called forward in the others,
Hmm.
that's the reflection of yourself.
Oh, and may I ask, if you don't mind, across the long practice arc of a lifetime, do you find that it ebbs and flows, like your capacity, has these sort of seasons? Well,
Still human, still human.
of course. That's great, because I'm in a low season. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for your honest questions and your expression.
Mm.
Inquiry and response come up together.
Indeed.
I see that we have about 5 more minutes. I'm not sure if someone else has their hand raised. They might, but I also want to check in with our coordinators and leaders to make sure that we don't need 5 minutes for some completions for today, because we'll have more time tomorrow. Is there any other business we need to take care of in these last few minutes?
No.
Anything, Suzanne, or anything?
No.
Okay. Fine. So Kim, you have your hand up. I'm sneaky. I see the little things. There she is. And I think if you speak, you pop up big here.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Hello.
Hello.
Wow, I'm taking in your last connection with Sunny. So thank you for that. It's very powerful for me.
And so one of the things I appreciate about Sunny is she doesn't hold back.
Oh, you're the real deal, man. Thank you.
Mhm.
So, part of what struck me is just how moved I was by the story you told, Flint. At the end, the koan
Intimacy.
of intimacy, yeah. Um,
Could you tell I was quivering?
oh, I could, and then I was quivery, and I was envisioning Blanche offering that to you, and you offering that to us,
Mhm.
and you know, and the line just like
Yeah,
off the paper, right?
right.
And so the question that came to my mind, I think, is evolved from other people's inquiries or questions to you, but was like, is intimacy love? Because that's what I feel.
Is what?
It's love,
Is it
love,
love?
yeah. But then I realized, like listening to Catherine and listening to Sunny, like it's it's not love in the sense,
Non human emotion.
right?
That's why
But then by the end, sorry, go ahead.
it's like meets like. Whatever is met, there's no leaning in, there's no leaning away. It's just this as it is, which is love.
Well, that's right. So listening to Catherine and listening to Sunny, I was like, oh, like it's also the whole thing, you know, the despair that I feel and the whole thing. But then I went right back by the end of your time with Sunny to love,
Hmm.
because that's love too,
That's right.
if it's fully held. And the quote you said of Dongshan's poem, I wish I had written it down, so I don't know if that will get sent out, but now I'm going to get it mixed up.
What are you remembering though? For what
Oh, you're not it.
it
It
actually is you.
it's actually is you.
Mhm. Everywhere
Right,
I go, I see it. It's not me. I'm it. Yeah.
right. So it's like I can get so, you know, like, oh, so that's it. It's now I get it. Now I'm it. But I never wasn't.
How does that teaching come to you when you walk through the shelter? Is it them or is it you?
You know, I have the same. So you told the story of the teacher saying like, what's under these robes, and like the impulse I had was to bow, and that's the same feeling I have when I go to the shelter.
Hmm. Yeah. Is it
So
love?
it
It
is.
is. Yeah.
Yeah.
But not ordinary. It's
No. No.
and so that's why we do this.
Yeah, and to be clear, I don't always feel that way when I go to the shelter.
Yeah.
But
And what is the what's the calligraphy that's over your right shoulder?
um, that is a cause calligraphy
Right.
for emptiness or
Emptiness.
boundlessness.
Boundlessness, right.
Boundlessness. Yeah,
Love.
exactly.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you. I thank all of you and each person, wherever you are, and every person who's come forward, every person who's called us here today and made this possible. Know that tomorrow our practice will continue. So look on the schedule, whatever your time zone is. If you can join in, that's wonderful. You won't want to miss the earlier talk in the day, which Suzanne will give. And then I'll come back with you again tomorrow at this time. Thank you very much.